Nick Kindelsperger is a Chicago Tribune food critic and has written about food and dining for the Chicago Tribune since 2016. You can often find him around the city, eating a questionable number of meals for research purposes. Previously, he's written for Epicurious, Serious Eats, Grub Street, New York Magazine, and the Washington Post. Louisa Chu is a Chicago Tribune food critic and co-host of the Chewing podcast. Born in Hong Kong, raised in Chicago, she lived in Los Angeles and Paris, where she graduated from Le Cordon Bleu. She trained at El Bulli in Spain and cooked in Alaska. Previously, she was a correspondent for Gourmet magazine and a fixer for Anthony Bourdain. Welcome, Louisa and Nick. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Now I'd like to turn it over to Roz from Vernon Area Public Library, Nick and Louisa. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's such a pleasure kind of host this program to talk about one of our favorite topics, just eating good food in Chicago. So Lisa and Nick, if you want to turn your cameras on, that would be great. And hey, Nick. And Louisa, hi, Louisa. So we're just going to get started. We're going to talk about all kinds of fun topics related to your jobs. First, I just want to talk a little bit about yourselves. Beth gave us a little your short bio, but Nick, I just wanted to ask you a little bit. I know you wrote for a variety of publications before coming to the Tribune, and what brought you to Chicago and ended up landing this job at the Tribune?
Well, it's a very long story, but I'll keep it short. I actually grew up in Southern Indiana in Hanover, which is a very small town of about 2,000. So when I graduated from college, I moved to New York and became obsessed with food while I was there, because I just didn't know that there was so much good food around all the time. And that's where I got hooked up with Serious Eats. And when it started with Ed Levine and Kinji joined Serious Eats eventually. And actually, I moved back to Chicago to be closer to family. And then I ran Serious Eats Chicago for a while, which was a site dedicated to eating around Chicago. And then I did Grub Street for a little bit. And then the Tribune called. That's about it.
Excellent. And Lisa, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your background. Let's see, Beth mentioned in your bio that you trained at El Bulli, which is, from what I understand, is a 3-star Michelin restaurant. So how did that prepare you for this position, working, kind of writing about food?
Well, El Bulli was considered one of the best restaurants in the world, depending on the kind of reports and reviews that you look at. And definitely there's a lot of similarities in terms of the modernist cuisine. We are kind of familiar with it in Chicago through restaurants like Alinea and the late Moto restaurant, even with new restaurants. For example, Nick reviewed Esme and I reviewed Kasama. So we kind of, have that sort of style of restaurant here in Chicago. We're pretty familiar with it, whereas other places you may not. And in terms of actually working there and cooking there, I think that having that sort of sense of adventure really was a good training ground, because even though that was, in terms of food, in terms of drink, very creative and inventive, it was one place. And with a lot of people that came here, went there. And so similarly here in Chicago, we are one place that has so many different influences from around the world. So that certainly helped in having that sort of language and training for the kinds of cuisine that, we consider some of the best here right now in Chicago.
And so I have to ask this really, I'm sure people must ask you about this when they read about in your bio, but you mentioned that you were a fixer for Anthony Bourdain, and what does that mean exactly? Like, what was that like?
That was, that's one of those terms which is used for, various things, but it's kind of like a catch-all term for somebody who, like, you got a problem and they fix it. And so typically what I did for Tony and the production was to scout locations, to find subjects, to interview them, basically if we had an idea of the kind of it actually for Chicago specifically, when Tony first came to do his, his shows that I worked with him on, he knew, for example, that he wanted to go to Hot Dogs, the dearly departed, late lamented hot dog sausage superstore. And so, so I set that up. And then he had he had ideas about some other kinds of places, and I would find that. And then also I'd come up with ideas, like, for example, we went to Fat Johnny's for the mother-in-law, which is this Chicago style tamale and chili in a hot dog dressed like a Chicago style hot dog. And so, it's kind of working to figure out a lot of different things about what would make good TV.
That sounds like it must have been pretty interesting and fun.
A lot of fun.
Let's see. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of what's happening at the Chicago Tribune right now. So let's see, Phil Vettel, who was a longtime food critic at the Tribune, I think he was there for about 30 years, I believe, retired maybe, has it been a year or 2 years? How long has it been?
Just last year.
Just
Actually,
last year?
Phil,
Okay.
was with the Trib for about 40 years, but was critic for about 30.
And so I'm just kind of curious. I mean, he obviously had, we all loved reading his reviews and had this wonderful reputation. And I'm just kind of curious, when the two of you had the opportunity to become the food critics for the Tribune, what was your vision? How did you want to I'm sure you wanted to mix things up a little bit and put your own impression on things. So how did you want to, what direction did you want to take things?
Well, there was no invitation to become the food critics. Louisa and I actually fought very hard to become the next critics. We decided that we had a very clear idea of what we wanted to do, and the Tribune wasn't quite sure if they were going to continue having food critics at that time. So we had to make a very clear stance about what we wanted to do. And, the biggest thing is that we wanted to expand the region that we would try to cover and explore restaurants, both downtown and neighborhood restaurants, that we thought were deserving of in-depth, research-driven reviews. And so we weren't quite sure if it was going to work out for a few months there. There's a lot of the turbulent times at the Tribune. A lot of people that have been there for a long time have left. And so we just, I don't know, Louisa, you can talk to this, but I mean, we had a lot of discussions about things that we were trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, it was, turbulence at the Trib, around the Trib. I mean, again, this was beginning of last year, towards the end of the year before, and we kind of all didn't know what was happening at the Trib or the world, kind of sort of like we are right now, throwback. And but yeah, Nick is right. It's like we were at a point where the Trib wasn't sure if we should have food critics and then what that would be. And but we knew that the kind of work that we had been doing for the past few years as food reporters, and also because we had reviewed some restaurants too, we wanted to expand on that. And that it was, as much as we appreciate, and again, I trained in fancy French restaurants. I love fancy French restaurants, but we need to review more than fancy French restaurants, and fans of Nick know that he puts in the miles and the work for all different kinds of restaurants. And, and so we knew that it was going to be that kind of restaurant in the city and the suburbs. We love the suburbs too. We go everywhere. We put on so many miles, and and so we know that there's a lot out there, and we wanted to incorporate all of that into what we knew our audience wanted and wants more of, and then also to expand who our audience is too, because one of the big things we've talked about is like not only covering underserved communities for the Tribune audience, but also covering underserved communities for the people in those communities, So for example, South Side and West Side of Chicago, there's a lot of people in those communities who have done some amazing work, especially in food. So we definitely knew that we wanted to do more of that, and we're going to do more of that still.
So I just want to make sure everyone, it's kind of a basic question, but I want to make sure everybody who's listening kind of knows when and where to find your work. So can you just tell us kind of what days and what section we would find your articles? And that includes both reviews and more like feature type stories.
We can find everything on chicagotribune.com on the dining section. In print, I believe we're every Wednesday now. Is that right, Louisa? I'm getting a guess. Yeah. And oftentimes our reviews are posted online on Mondays, usually early in the day. And so that's sort of the schedule, but things are a little more flexible these days. So we're trying to just roll with it. But
that way in our library world too. Things are definitely more flexible.
I would say 95% of the time, that's how you'll find
okay.
us.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then also sometimes our stories, come up on Sundays too, food and travel, for example. And it's very fluid because, as we all know, you can find pretty much anything online now, but people really still love print.
So because there's two of you and there are two critics. So tell us the benefit of having two people in this role instead of the model before with Phil, where it was one. And also, do you ever consider reviewing a restaurant together to get like a he, she kind of point of view?
You want to go for it, Louisa, or you got it?
You go first.
Okay.
You're talking.
So let's see. I talked first, so then it's me. I'm tagged. So yeah, Louisa and I have talked about reviewing restaurants together, and we're going to do that more once the pandemic slowly calms down a little bit. But we actually did try to review one place together, and then we decided that we should not do that. It was when I decided to review Ed Beths, which had just reopened after many a year. And, I knew the food wasn't great, but I just had such fond memories of it from when I was a kid. And so Louisa and I actually met there. We went through the whole menu, and then it was like, I was like, I should take my 8-year-old daughter with me to the restaurant. So that's what we ended up doing. But we had planned to do it, but as far as planning which places we're going to review, usually we just get pretty excited about a place and then one of us just tackles it. So we haven't fought over a review yet, have we? I don't think so.
I don't think so. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, and then as the benefits, it's great not to have to write a review every week. I only have to do a review every other week now. And so that's one of the benefits of having two reviewers.
Yes, I second that motion. As much as we appreciate the form of the review, there's also lots of other stuff that's happening in the food world in and around Chicago. And so, it takes a fair amount of time to actually, because we try to visit restaurants at least twice before we review them with a starred review. And I have mixed feelings about stars, but we'll get to that another time.
Okay.
And so so for example, not that there's been that many, but like, for example, if we go to a long tasting menu restaurant like Kasama, which is one that I did most recently, that's like a 2.5 to 3 hour dinner, and Nick has done similar, lengthier tasting menus like with Claudia last. And so that's just a lot of time invested in that, not only, in that, but then also, we're all like suddenly covering things like health experts now too, there's so many changing rules and regulations, and when things pop up, open and close, for example, I try to write a column about that every other week. Tracking that plus sudden closures, and then just things that happen that just ends up taking a lot of time. And we want to be able to cover that well, and serve our audience well.
So I wanted to ask you, I know it was kind of a big deal a few years ago when Phil Vettel decided he wasn't going to visit restaurants anonymously any longer. He was going to let them know when he was dining there. And so I wanted to know how you feel about that. And when you make a dinner reservation at a restaurant, do you use your own name? How does that work?
Yeah, so I don't use my name when I go to a restaurant. Usually, I say usually now because everything's different because of the pandemic, and I just try to show up and be as anonymous. There are pictures of me out there. I feel okay with that because there were pictures of our last dining critic out way before he became unanonymous, I guess. And so it was an open secret that restaurants would know who he was. Some restaurants, many restaurants just simply don't care. They're just doing their own thing and they don't care if restaurant critics are coming by at all anyway. So, you know, it's a different time and I'm okay with that. As far as now, it's really hard because they have to check your vaccine card and they have to check your ID. And I don't really feel like lying about that. So, you know, those are the times we live in and we have to kind of roll with it and do what we can. I never accept free meals. So we always pay for our own meals. I never ask them to give me anything. So yeah, I guess that's how things are right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't lie about that. Not that you don't just feel like it, but you don't lie about that.
No, I don't lie about
Right.
So I'm sure you are, you know, every restaurant, you know, there's so many restaurants that must want you to come to visit, and you must get press releases and contacted by PR people all the time, wanting them to, you know, you to consider their restaurant. So how do you narrow it down? Like, how do you make a decision that you're going to visit a restaurant and not visit others? What goes into your decision-making process?
You know, that it's a gut feeling. I mean, we know, number one is that we keep an exhaustive list. I am a obsessive list maker. And so I know, you know, who's opened when, where for the past, you know, like 2.5 years for sure, and have been tracking that. And then we just have a gut feeling about what is the kind of place that merits a review, you know, that should be reviewed. Not just for our own gut feeling, but probably that our audience is going to want to see reviewed. And then sometimes if there's a question about it, you know, we'll discuss it ahead of time, and then we'll do an initial visit. If it's not something that is going to be a full-blown review, it might be used for something else. But you know, a lot of it comes down to, if you look at the kinds of restaurants we reviewed over this, you know, past how many months, 7, 8 months or so, you know, I mean, for the most part, they're the kinds of restaurants that, you know, pretty clearly that they should have been reviewed. A few of them are places that we have felt very strongly about it personally and they're discussed, and that other people haven't necessarily. And like, for example, I reviewed a place called Korean Spoon, which is a small takeout Korean mom and pop restaurant. And a lot of it was because not much had been written about them. And I would discuss with Nick. He was like, and he was interested, hadn't really heard much about it. I was like, that is great, because I love this place and I want Nick to know and I want everyone else to know. And so that's the kind of gut feeling that we go with.
So when you go to a restaurant and you are preparing for a review, a couple of questions. Well, do you order like what you want to eat? Do you order what you think is going to be popular with other people? And do you ever bring someone with you so that you can sample more things?
I usually go with one other person. Sometimes it's my wife when we are able to get a babysitter and stuff, but other times it's friends. And I just want to order what's exciting. I mean, we all want to eat the best food we can. If there's an item that's really popular, then I want to try that too. And so it's nice to be able to share food around and see what we all think about it. But most of the time, I'm just going off of what sounds delicious, like right now.
Okay. And so if you're going to, there must be certain factors that really make an impression on you when you visit a new restaurant. And so I'm kind of wondering, there's certain factors, and maybe that you can share with like us, like as a just like a regular old person, and we're trying out a new restaurant. Like, what are the factors that you think we should be paying most closely attention to in terms of like an overall dining experience?
Boy, that's really changed now with the time of COVID, you know. I mean, first of all, we're regular people too. And And, a lot of it, it's the classic, like how does it, things that we consider, that are kind of like the classic, how easy to get in touch with a restaurant sometimes. For example, one of the restaurants that's coming up soon, we did mini reviews, was a restaurant called Kitchen and Cocktails. And so you'll see that review coming up pretty soon. And it is a notable Black-owned restaurant in the downtown area. And boy, it was so hard to get in touch with them. Like, are you open? Are you closed? I don't understand what's happening here, And, and so weighing that and mentioning that, because I'd imagine that some people might not try nearly as hard as I did to try to figure that out, and then, and also, the overall kind of experience, as well as, for us, I think the food weighs very heavily in that equation as far as how it's reviewed. We have tried really hard to be understanding of the extraordinary circumstances that we're all living under right now. So we're, we try to be pretty forgiving when it comes to that. Occasionally there'll be oddball experiences. And like I had oddball experience with a restaurant called Bar Goa, where I was like, what? I don't understand what's happening with the service here, And if it's just once, but it was like 2-3 times, I was like, I have to mention that. And then of course, the Wiener Circle, the infamous hot dog stand in Chicago, which I had a quite, alarming experience with. So a lot of it is like, bottom line, is the food really good or not? That's what mainly we care about. And then the pricing was that a good deal? And then the overall service, understanding all of that in the time of COVID, is kind of the classic review criteria. But having a lot of, fuzzy wiggle room around the edges there.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think I'm much more forgiving of service if I can see that the attention of the restaurant is actually focused on making the food. And so I will cut restaurants loads of slack if there's just things going on in the kitchen that I can't describe, or that, both Louisa and I are pretty great home cooks, I would say. We can say that, right? And so yeah. I'm not so much into going to a place where I know I could have done this very easily. So I just am always amazed when I go to like just a little restaurant, and the amount of effort that goes into a dish is just mind-boggling, and it's still a good deal. And that's when I get really excited, is because it's just, that's just how they do it. That's how they learn to make the dish. And that's what's really exciting to me.
Well, let's see. So most of the people that are watching tonight are probably from the northern suburbs, because we're in Lincolnshire, and obviously Highland Park's in Highland Park. And so we were just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your thoughts about the dining scene in our area, anything any restaurants that you just love in our area, or just like trends that you see in suburban dining.
I think specifically in the area, especially around the Lincolnshire area, because I mentioned to you, Roz, I used to live up in the area, is that like there are a lot of really terrific, speaking of Korean, some Korean and Indian restaurants that are around there, because a lot of the families that have lived up there, I had a family that lived down the hall from me that used to invite me to catered like parties for Indian food. And I was like, this is amazing, so definitely want to explore more of that, seen in more in the Lincolnshire area. And then I think also around the Highland Park area, and a little bit farther north, there's like still some interesting little pockets, especially around like, around like pizza and hot dogs. There's like these kind of like favorite little mom and pop places that have really, done and survived so well. So, those are some of the, but I always like to say, but if you have hidden tips, please let us know. We always appreciate that.
what I really love, and if I'm ever in the area, is Mizrahi Grill. It's the falafel and then the shawarma that they have there. I mean, and their pita is so soft. It's just like a pillow that you can hold on to. That's one of my favorites in that area. And I actually, before this started, we were talking about Madame Zuzu's in Highland Park as well. And I was really impressed when I went there last. It's been a while, but on the more vegan, vegetarian route.
So I guess you're right. Dining right now, I mean, COVID has just, turned the restaurant industry just upside down, and it's been so tough. And so I guess I'm kind of wondering, have you seen any innovations as a result of COVID from restaurants, and what have you been impressed by?
I think one of the biggest game changers for a lot of restaurants was the to-go cocktails. In terms of survivability, restaurants that had been able to do that, I mean, they were making, I think the last I saw was like about 60% of the revenue. And it was so funny how that seemed to be like, no. And then suddenly it was like, here you go, here's your cocktail to go all garnished. I mean, you're not supposed to drink it, like on the street or in your car. But I mean, that's been kind of one of those like, oh, why wasn't that okay? I mean, it's sealed, labeled, all that. It's not unlike buying, spirits or beer from liquor store. So that has been pretty amazing. I think that the ease too, and especially now that we're in this sort of, bridge phase in terms of, curbside pickups or walk-up windows, has, I think, been a huge, convenience, safety, buffer for both the customers and for, employees. And it's, I think, been pretty convenient for people who have, kids like Nick or dogs like me, and Nick has a dog too, so I think that those have been, few things that I was just like, oh, why didn't we always do this? And I think it's probably going to be around for a bit more.
Yeah, figuring out takeout is something that a lot of restaurants just didn't kind of want to bother with before. And there's an art to it, and making sure it's something that families would actually be able to serve at home or want to order to serve. A lot of places were trying to do these meals that were like with 20 different boxes that you combined everything with, but then some places really got a feel for like family style entrees that were delicious and easy to serve. I have to admit, I'm not against the QR code menus and bills. Oh. I love paying ahead of time. It's one of my least favorite things is paying a bill at the end when you could leave, but you're just waiting around. But I find that really interesting, and maybe even ordering ahead of time has been a really interesting concept. So I'm glad they're experimenting. It's happening so fast, though. This is a experimenting under pressure, so I feel like everything's happening faster than I can take it all in.
I'm also surprised to see how many restaurants have opened during this time frame. I think the people that have opened brand new restaurants during this time frame must be incredibly brave. And what would make you do that? And so, are you surprised by that?
Yeah.
Sure. I guess I write a regular column about restaurant openings. I would say that it's almost 99% people that got laid off, furloughed, and then they realized, like, with the state of the world, it was like, what, it's now or never. They were able to do it with a bit more financial support with friends and family who were in a similar situation. But for example, one of my favorite stories and for our Takeout Awards last year was, I can't remember what the award was. We came up with different categories, like maybe best pandemic pizza pop-up or something along those lines. Was Millie's Pizza. And it was, a lot of these are stories of people who had always thought they kind of wanted to do it. And so, for example, he always wanted to have a pizza place, was experimenting at home, and was working as a server, actually at, let's see, it was a restaurant in Schaumburg. You know, and then during his furlough time, just really went hard at it, and then opened out of a ghost kitchen. And so I think a lot of that too has been that sort of bridge in people realizing like, oh yeah, you can start these in these virtual kitchens or ghost kitchens. You don't necessarily need to build out a dining room. The experience you're going to get anyway is for the most part going to be takeout for a long time. And so that's where we've seen like such like incredibly inspiring stories of people who've taken this very dark time and have just really gone with and put into motion and realized their dreams. You know, and so he's now actually moving into a next phase of opening, you know, his actual brick and mortar restaurant. But there was as terrible as it's been, there was a bit of a leveled playing field when people realized like, oh yeah, it could just be, you know, it could be takeout, and you could just kind of just do what you always wanted to do.
So I guess looking ahead a little bit, so what are you excited about? Like what's kind of like, are there some new chefs coming to Chicago? Do you have any predictions for 2022 and what that will look like? What are your thoughts about that?
Zero predictions about 2022.
Okay.
I have given up predicting anything that's going to happen. I've been so confused for 2 years. I feel like I'm just astonished by people adapting to what's going to go on, but I haven't been like thrilled by any long projects that I've heard about in advance. So I've been so much more excited about these like things that just pop up out of nowhere. So I don't know, you, Louisa, are there any big projects that you're looking forward to?
You know, I think big projects or restaurant wise, I have not, I haven't, I don't know if you have, I don't think we've tried, like, for example, the new big, like Jose Andres and like big restaurant. It's that opened downtown with the family that's behind the Gibson's group. But also I'm also much more excited about, you know, some of the smaller undiscovered and like uniquely Chicago and, you know, Chicago area restaurants and food, not just restaurants, but food, not even just chefs, you know. I mean, it's like we're really redefining. It's not just chefs, it's not just restaurants, but people who are doing like the one amazing, like there's this one woman who does this pop-up. She's been doing this pop-up called, it's funny, it's called Mama Day, which translates in Chinese kind of like, it's okay, it's so, you know, and she does these amazing, beautiful baked goods and pastries, and, you know, to keep in mind possibly for her pop-up coming up for Lunar New Year. And so stuff like that. And then, like, you know, people who are sort of transitioning, that's the thing that I'm most excited about. My prediction, though, one of the big ones is that what we really saw going into the new year is that business owners, especially in the food space, are taking the initiative to do what they feel is most safe for themselves and their employees and their customers. And, you know, city and state officials are lagging far behind that. And so I have to really applaud everyone who's really gone forward and done that, you know, and, you know, weeks in advance of any sort of regulations that have come through. So that's been incredibly challenging. And just, again, I said I was going to maybe cry, and that's like brings tears to my eyes thinking about like what they had to really give up in terms of a lot of places who closed during the holidays, where so many of them could have made so much money and really, you know, I mean, it's like, yeah, it brings tears to my eyes to think about, you know, what they had to do, and they did it even though they didn't have to.
So I know predicting restaurants is hard, but maybe you can predict something like this. So is there something that you think we're going to start seeing on like all the menus? Like, you know, it was like kale for a while and cauliflower wasn't everything for a while. And like, what do you think is going to be the thing that we're going to start seeing on everybody's menu?
Ooh, so you're probably going to start seeing a lot more of these focaccia breads that you serve for entrees. I've seen it twice now. Once at, can't even remember the first restaurant I reviewed. Oh man, no, it's a very high hydration dough, it puffs up dramatically, and it is pretty delicious. And it tasted like a bread. What was that restaurant, Louisa, that is by the Boca group that's Italian that just opened?
Alla Vita.
Alla Vita, that's it.
And I know, and I also, okay, so this is like where our all time has no meaning. And because I know the bread you're talking about, and it looks like a big puffed up pita. And it was also, I first saw that at Adelina, which is currently closed temporarily. But yeah.
Oh, it's the chef that had Sky, and then he opened up this new restaurant in the South Loop.
That you went, and it was really hot.
I went, and it was really hot because the air conditioning broke, and they hadn't. Yeah.
A good time to check out maybe chicagotribune.com/food for the review. Just
anyway, they had one of these breads and they put truffles on it, and it was delicious. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. And then I saw it again at Alla Vita, but that was more of like a breadstick sort of flavor, and still delicious. But I can see that floating around for a little bit.
I'm not sure if I know that there's going to be a specific food item for this coming year. But I think that we're still going to see more pizza, for sure. I like the last couple of years. And then also, I think we're going to finally start to see, which for me, being Chinese American, I'm very excited about, is that like we're going to finally sort of see like the chefier versions of Chinese American food. Because we've seen that in just about every other kind of cuisine. And so I am a huge fan of like the old school, Chinese American chop suey joints. I grew up working at my uncle's restaurant in Chicago. So I love like the egg foo young and all that sort of thing. And so I am hoping we're finally going to see some of that coming up. And I suspect that we will. There's a place that started as a pop-up called 9 Bar in Chicago's Chinatown. And they're opening their own restaurant coming up soon. The kids who started that, who came from the Moon Palace family. So fingers crossed. There's a couple. I know Nick. Yeah.
And Three Little Pigs just opened up, and it's this guy doing a salt and pepper fried chicken sandwich. Just kind of blew my mind. Yes. But yeah, it's all these kids playing with the flavors that they grew up with. It's just fascinating.
Yeah.
So, do you have any tips for people who have tips for getting a reservation at a really hot restaurant? Like some restaurants you still can't get into. I know things are crazy right now, but any tips? What would you do? How do you get into a restaurant that seems to be like booked a month in advance or more?
I love eating early. I have a young kid, so going out on a Tuesday night, that's just, there's usually tables then. So I never have problems getting into places usually because I like to plan my weekends kind of backwards. But as far as getting in on a night, that's really tough. Do you have any tips, Louisa?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say is that one of the restaurants that you reviewed that was like a challenge was Rosemary by Top Chef winner Joe Falam, which I know Nick is I'm not sure if you're welcome back, even though your review was very fair, but read the review yourself and let us know what you think. And, and so sometimes it's just a matter of trying. And one of the big things now is Instagram. Like just about every restaurant posts on Instagram, like when they're going to be opening up reservations. For example, the restaurant I mentioned, Kitchen and Cocktails, when they opened, it was like they were totally booked. And it was like, oh, but they said that they're going to be dropping reservations on this day and time and to keep looking. And then, for example, Kasama, Steve Dolinsky, the former Hungry Hound, now the food guy, who was a friend of the Chicago Tribune food section, he'd ask me, he's like, how do you get a restaurant? How do you get a reservation at Kasama, for example? And I said, sometimes services like Resi, they have a thing you click on the date and it says notify me. They'll notify you. They actually will, so, and then if you really want a certain day or time, message where you want to go and ask them. It's like, because sometimes they can give you a heads up, so that helps.
That's good to know.
And one other thing is just calling the restaurant sometimes. Sometimes they don't put all the reservations online. They'll only give some of them away, so it's no harm in trying. And then, bar seating is usually the only.
I was shocked one time on Resi how I clicked that notify me, and I actually learned about it, and I actually got a reservation. I was shocked how that worked.
I know. I was like, what? This actually was like one of these years, so many in line. I was like, oh yeah, I am.
Okay, so we're going to do just kind of a lightning round of a few questions, and then we have some questions from people that are watching, so we'll get to those next. So lightning round, just quick questions. Okay, first one is favorite place to eat on your day off?
I love to go to this Carniceria Jimenez, which is a couple blocks away from me, and ask for potato tacos. And they are like these kind of mashed potato tacos that they throw in the fryer. And they're like $4 for both my wife and I eat. So that's what I do.
Yeah. My favorite, I've eaten more from Chinese Kitchen in Chicago at the corner of Cicero and Addison. And I've gotten them to make what I like to call Mongolian broccoli. And so they stir fry broccoli, and it's in this sort of savory, spicy sauce over fried crispy rice noodles. And so that's kind of like my favorite. I love that.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. What is currently the hottest restaurant in Chicago right now?
Ooh, I don't know if any restaurant right now is doing. I'm really sorry, but it's really quite bleak out there at this particular point. But
yeah,
I gotta say, maybe it might, in terms of hotness, heat, it might be a cross between Haleo or Kitchen Cocktails, a Jose Andres restaurant.
Yeah.
And yeah,
okay.
but yeah.
Okay, who is a chef that you would want to ask to prepare dinner for you at your home?
I would love Jonathan Zaragoza he's sort of getting ready to open a new restaurant. We don't know where, he won't tell me, but I'm trying to get it out of him. But his dad owns Birria Zaragoza on the south side, and they do this goat dish. And he's been staging at all these restaurants around both Chicago and all around Mexico. And I love Mexican food more than anything. So that's probably.
But he did say Logan Square. So we know it's at least Logan Square.
I know, I keep looking out and I can't find it.
I know. For me, it's hard to say right now with COVID restrictions, probably no, the very idea, it's but I wrote in my Korean Spoon review that I would eat at this restaurant every day if I could, is probably the chef and co-owner at Korean Spoon in Glenview, which I just love their food. It's like everything that they do, that the mom does is like a jewel. It's so beautiful. And it's I love all the little different dishes with the banchan and the soup. It's like, oh my gosh, if I could have a big spicy tofu bubbling cauldron of soup right now, I love that. Just love that.
Okay. Okay. What is the quality that is important for being a good food critic?
Let's see. There's you have to be hungry. You gotta really want to eat a lot of food. I think that's a good start, maybe.
Yeah. I think that's a good start. I think that the other part of it, which people kind of forget, is actually hopefully to be a fairly good writer, storyteller, which, that's the other part of it. People are always like, oh yeah, eating out. And it's like, yeah, that's just part of it. Eating out is easy. Although maybe sometimes it's not for everybody, because I think that the open-mindedness you know, should be there, and it's kind of a given, but not always. But I think to be like a fairly engaging storyteller is the other big part of it too.
So do you have a favorite cooking show or podcast besides Chewing, which is Louisa's podcast, which we all like, but besides Chewing, do you have a favorite cooking show or podcast?
I've been getting obsessed with these videos on YouTube that I've been watching from this guy in Chicago, and the name is slipping my mind. But yeah, I don't know. There's not one that I've been listening to a lot, not a podcast necessarily.
Yeah, I should plug, Nick's got a podcast too, but it's about music.
Yeah, so then we'll not talk about it.
What's the name of it, Nick? Tell us.
Oh, it's a Radiohead podcast called Anyone Can Play Guitar. And so you can see that on my Twitter handle.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I have to say, I do still really love, and I always forget, is it Great British Baking Show?
Oh yeah.
But the early years, I haven't caught up with the most recent ones yet, because I love that kind of like, they're so helpful and so kind to each other. You know, I have not watched food TV for a very long time, because I don't really need that sort of stress that like a lot of them have sort of relied on. You know, it's like I lived it.
Right.
You know, as a chef, and you know, the manufactured kind of reality TV stuff, I'm just kind of like, you know, I don't need that, and especially right now. So, but yeah.
My daughter really likes Nailed It, which is this thing where they try to do these things, and it makes me so nervous because I can see people making mistakes, and I just like get so frustrated because I can see it happening.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. So we have a bunch of questions from people that are watching. So we're going to get to these questions now. So let's see. We were talking about kind of, well, the question is, have you seen many chefy Italian beef variants? So someone taking Italian beef and escalating it.
Nick did a story on that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it.
No, yeah.
Yeah, no, well, I know Cassava, which Louisa just reviewed, they have sort of a chefy Italian beef on their menu. This is something that needs to happen more, and I think that it's coming finally. I know Izakaya Mita was doing a sort of teriyaki Italian beef thing, and so yeah, it's really hard to do an Italian beef. The economy of it is not quite happening anymore, because the beef prices have just gone up so much, but I love Italian beef.
Yeah, which I gotta say is kind of ironic, is that, you know, because the Italian, you know, the origin story of the Italian beef was to take a cheap cut of beef, slice it really thin, and like make a, you know, big meal out of this, you know, a little bit of meat and a lot of bread and condiments. And so at Kasama, which was our only 4-star review, since Nick and I have been critics at the Trib, they do a version with really, really thin shaved pork adobo and a longanisa, which is a garlicky, fatty Filipino, slightly sweet sausage. And then he loads it with giardiniera, which I loved because we're big fans of giardiniera, and Nick did a story about giardiniera too. And then also what I loved was that it was automatically dipped. There wasn't an option. It was just like, no, this is a chefy prerogative. I'm going to dip this sandwich and you're going to, and I was like, yes, perfect. It was a perfect kind of a dip. So, so check out Nick's story, and that, yeah, we're probably going to see some more of that coming up too.
This is a quick question. Someone wants to know if you can repeat the name of the restaurant in Glenview, Louisa, that you mentioned.
Oh, Korean Spoon.
Okay. Let's see. There's a question from someone who wants to know if you are going to a restaurant that features a food that's new to you, say it's Burmese, it's a cuisine that you're not familiar with. Apart from the taste, how do you know that it's authentic or appropriate and reflects really the culture that it's supposed to be?
That's an excellent question. And I guess there's no right answer. There's sort of a personal, do I like this thing? But that is not the whole story. And sometimes you have to look past what you initially think about a food to think about how it was prepared. So we read a lot of books and watch a lot of videos online. Sometimes when I'm reviewing a place, I'll actually try to recreate the dish that they're best known for, to try to get my head around like what is going through this. Sometimes we'll invite people along with us that maybe know more to get their opinion about it. I did a review where I brought along sadly someone who just passed away, but one of the owners of Izakaya Mita, which was Brian Mita. I took him to a Japanese restaurant because they had a dish that I had never made before. And so that was really instructive, but then you also have to say, do I even like this thing? So, I mean, yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah, I have to say, if I can mention a couple of the words that I struggle with sometimes, and we've talked about, and I have to say, sometimes I downright hate these words, is in the context that they're used, are like when it comes to, like authentic or ethnic. Those to me are words that are weighted, that we can evolve beyond. And the question has come up recently, for example, of all things, I'm working on a story about Juicy Lucy cheeseburgers. When I went to Minneapolis, there are these cheese stuffed regional burgers that are famous in Minneapolis. And so there's two places that have claimed to invented them, and I tried them both and they're really different. And then have now found a few places here in Chicago, and they're so different. So the question of like authenticity, it's evolving, I mean, and so maybe one might consider using a word like traditional. And, for example, like I often hear applied to being Chinese American, like, is this an authentic Chinese restaurant? It's like, well, what do you mean by that exactly? And so there are certain standards in certain places that we can compare to, and it's a very difficult kind of shifting ground.
Let's see, someone would like to know, do you ever write negative reviews?
Oh yeah,
yes.
yeah, for sure.
But
not
the
often.
Tribune hadn't,
And
yeah.
the Tribune hadn't for 30 years. So we've done a few, I guess, but less than, I guess we've just sort of not shied away from making our points known, I guess.
Yeah. But, one of the things I have to say is the most negative review that I wrote was about the Wiener Circle. So for people who may not know, it is the infamous hot dog stand that's more known for their late night, very volatile, drunken scene than necessarily the food. And I unfortunately gave them a half star. And it was after visiting 4 times and really, again, considering the whole context. But what I'd like to say is what I've been looking over this past, review period that we've done is that I'm glad I've been able to have still a dialogue with the people at the restaurants that I, gave lower starred reviews to. And again, I have mixed feeling about stars. That in this very volatile time that we've had, when there's like such a problematic discourse, I think it's really important to keep those conversations ongoing, because it's important for us as journalists. It's important for who we cover, I think, to understand why, as well as our audience. So, we don't write mean reviews, but we write negative reviews when we have to.
Someone would like to know about your thoughts about why Chicago has lost most of its German restaurants. There used to be kind of a more thriving German restaurant population. What's happened to those, or in your opinion?
Good question. A lot of those restaurants opened because a lot of first generation Germans moved over to Chicago and opened up these places. And then in some respects, it's just a demographic issue that a lot of families have then that were German moved out to different neighborhoods or to the suburbs or across the country. And so a German restaurant that sustained a German neighborhood no longer works because the neighborhood is not, 90% German anymore. So that's simply one reason. I think there is a unfair reputation that German restaurants are just greasy and lots of sausages and fried pork. I love German food. I don't think I'm German. The Kindelsperger definitely sounds German, but I
I was
don't
gonna
really know
say.
where I'm from. But
Mm.
yeah, you know,
Yeah.
there's I love this place called Flatten Point that is sort of Germanish, which is on Fullerton Avenue in Logan Square, and then Table Donkey Stick is an Alpine restaurant, so sort of German Swiss kind of thing that I just love, and so you're seeing actually some of these longer restaurants. I'm sorry I'm talking so long, but we can
No.
talk about Louisa and I. If you get us started, it'll just
I know.
I think there's a lot of places that are being inspired by German restaurants that they've gone to in Germany and then coming back to America and opening up. And then maybe we're seeing some older German restaurants sort of close after a long time.
Yeah, I just meant really quick. Is it, yeah, demographics, and it's funny, as much as I love German food in Germany, I always remember one time when I was there, and one of the things I remember saying is that I was asking about the menu, and they're saying, I was asking about vegetables. They're like, but meat is the best vegetable. So.
Let's see, there are two people that mentioned, well, Louisa, you referenced that there were some Korean restaurants in our area that you really like. And there's two people that asked, can you give any specific restaurants that you recommend in our area?
I can't say right now because I haven't been back through, but when I know that there was like a few that were right. I can't recommend them because I don't know recently.
Okay, there's no problem.
Yeah, but but let me know if you try them. What you think? Yeah.
And let's see, people are getting kind of specific. They want to know your favorite pizzeria. What's your favorite pizzeria? Can you tell us that?
Well, my favorite new one is called Uncle Jerry's, and it's in Cary, Illinois, and it's the best deep dish I've found yet in the city. And the other one is Paper Thin Pizza, which I'm coming out with a review of pretty soon, in the Soho House in the West Loop. Is the skinniest pizza I've ever found, bar none, not even close to skinny.
Okay.
I can't say specifically. That's like, it depends on the mood. Lately, I've been obsessed with, been wanting this artichoke spinach pizza and a spaghetti and meatballs pizza from George's Deep Dish. And it's a thick crust, and it's, kind of like a, sort of like a focaccia style crust, and like these crazy loaded toppings, but then I also love the super thin crust too. For example, like, of course, Vito Nick's down on the South Side. And I love their egg and giardiniera pizza. Italian Fiesta, they have a shrimp pizza. It's like another thin Chicago style pizza in Hyde Park. Famous because that was where Michelle Obama introduced Barack Obama to her favorite family pizza. So, but so many. We did a whole story about our favorite pizzas, and we got to update that too. So,
there's a question about the holiday cookie contest. Is that something that both of you are involved with? Okay, so the question is, thank you for continuing this cookie contest during the pandemic. It's something that Lisa really looks forward to. What qualities do you look for in a winning entrant? There's such a wide variety of types that are submitted.
Oh, good question. First of all, Louisa has almost single-handedly kept this cookie contest going, and because it really could have stopped. We just didn't have the people to get it done, but it's something that we put a lot of effort. So it means so much when people say that. But I'll let Louisa take it from here. I just wanted to give her a little bump.
No, I so appreciate it, Nick, because this past year, so I am a huge cookie fan, and I was very honored to be able to write the cookie contest story for the past 5 years. This past year, because I was out of town, I went up to Minnesota, Minneapolis, to do a story about this restaurant there called Owamni, which is one of the first chefy indigenous foods restaurants in the world, really. I didn't get a chance to bake for it, but last year, was the first year where it was like, should we do it? How we're going to do it? Because in the past, cookie contestants baked their cookies and brought them in. Of course, we couldn't figure out how to do that. And so now we have the recipes online, they're voted on, and then they're now baked by people, journalists at the Trib. So what we look for is typically it's, part of it is like supposed to be the story and then like the, originality. It's bottom line, it's got to be a good tasting cookie, and now, since we are baking them, you're entrusting your recipe to the journalists who are baking them. So I would say that that's probably going to continue on. And so what we really look for is, I think, a cookie that ultimately is going to taste good, that really speaks to being like sort of a special occasion cookie. And quite frankly, I think for me, if you hit like a few key flavors and textures, like I still totally love and remember there was a white chocolate chunk, orange, and maybe a little bit of cinnamon cookie from a couple of years ago. Oh, I loved that cookie. It was like all the flavors of like Christmas potpourri, like in a really good way. And it's like delicious, delightful, buttery cookie. So, yeah. So,
And keep them small. Don't get them too big. When they're too big, then you can't eat a number of different cookies. You can only eat one cookie. But if you keep them small, then you don't feel bad if you just keep going back, right?
I don't have that problem, but
Oh.
okay.
All right, well, anyhow, we went through lots of questions, and I think we're just going to wrap things up, but I just, want to thank you, both of you, for being with us tonight. It really was so much fun to talk with you and to hear your opinions on so many different things. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thanks for
Thank you
having us.
both.
Thank you so much for having us. We really so appreciated it.
And thank you everyone for joining us. Beth, it was great working with you again, of course, and we hope you have a nice evening. Again, this program is recorded, so we will have it up on the library YouTube channel, within a couple days, and we'll make sure that you know where to find it so that you can share it with other people in your life who might also find this topic very interesting. So, anyhow, have a good evening, everyone. Good night.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.